Let me tell you something about the invisible men of the digital age. They're everywhere and nowhere at once. They scroll, they observe, but they never post. No selfies, no status updates, no opinions broadcasted into the void. And in a world where everyone seems desperate to be seen, their silence feels almost revolutionary. You probably know one of these men, the one who knows everything happening online but never contributes to the noise. When you ask him why, he might shrug and say, "I just don't see the point." But beneath that casual dismissal lies a complex psychology that reveals something profound about modern masculinity and the quiet resistance to a culture that demands constant performance. See, for many men, social media represents a fundamental conflict with how they've been taught to exist in the world. Generations of masculine conditioning taught them that strength meant stoicism, that real men handle their business quietly, without seeking applause. And suddenly, here's this digital arena asking them to do the opposite. Share your feelings, document your journey, be vulnerable for likes. It's not that these men are antisocial. They just can't reconcile the performative nature of social media with their internal compass of authenticity. Because social media has created a new kind of masculine pressure. It's not enough to be successful anymore, you have to display it. It's not enough to be a good father, partner, friend. You need the photos to validate it. But the men who don't post have opted out of that exhausting cycle. Psychologists have discovered something fascinating about them. These men often score higher on measures of intrinsic motivation and self-determination. They're driven by internal rather than external rewards. Their sense of worth doesn't fluctuate with digital metrics. Their silence isn't always confidence, though. Sometimes it's self-preservation. Because social media has a way of weaponizing vulnerability, especially for men. Share too much emotion, you're weak. Share your success, you're arrogant. Share your struggles, you're complaining. The rules feel impossible to navigate, so they choose not to navigate them at all. There's a concept in psychology called masculine gender role conflict. It describes the stress men experience when pulled between competing definitions of manhood. Social media amplifies this exponentially. It asks men to be simultaneously vulnerable and invulnerable, successful but humble, emotional but not too emotional. The men who don't post have found a simple solution. They've removed themselves from the equation entirely. And maybe there's wisdom in that withdrawal. When you're not performing your life, you actually get to live it. These men experience their achievements without immediately thinking of how to frame them for maximum impact. They process their failures privately, without the added weight of public witness. For many men, not posting is about maintaining mystery, depth that can't be reduced to a profile. There's something profoundly masculine about being unknowable, about having layers unavailable for public consumption. Every unshared thought, every undocumented moment adds to an interior world that belongs to them alone. This connects to psychological ownership, the feeling that something is fundamentally yours. When men don't post, they maintain complete ownership over their narrative. Their story isn't subject to interpretation or judgment. It's theirs to tell or not tell, to share with chosen few rather than anonymous many. Many men who don't post are actually deeply observant. They're anthropologists of the online world, studying behavior from the shadows. They see the patterns, the performances, the desperate bids for attention. They see how social media changes people, amplifies insecurities, turns friends into competitors, and they want no part of that game. Not because they'd lose, but because playing would mean losing something more important, their sense of self, independent of public perception. There's also the emotional labor that social media demands. Every post requires emotional performance. Happy enough to seem successful, but not so happy you seem out of touch. Vulnerable enough to seem human, but not so vulnerable you seem weak. It's exhausting. Emotional gymnastics that many men refuse to perform. Instead, they choose emotional autonomy. They process feelings privately, share them selectively, maintain boundaries around their inner world. This isn't emotional repression. It's emotional sovereignty, the right to feel without broadcasting, to hurt without seeking digital sympathy, to celebrate without needing witnesses. Not all men who don't post are making empowered choices, though. Some are paralyzed by perfectionism. Others fear judgment. The psychology of masculine shame plays a huge role here. Men are socialized to fear being seen as inadequate. Social media, with its brutal metrics of worth, becomes a minefield of potential shame triggers. Every post that doesn't get enough engagement becomes evidence of not being enough. Yet within that protection, something interesting happens. These men often develop richer offline relationships. When you're not performing friendship online, you cultivate it in person. They understand that real masculine bonding happens in shared experience, not shared posts. In the garage, working on a project. On the court, in the quiet beer after a long day. These moments don't photograph well, but they create bonds that don't need digital proof. There's a fascinating generational divide here. Younger men who choose not to post are making a radical statement. They're rejecting the culture they were raised in. They've seen the full life cycle of social media, watched friends become influencers, losing authenticity, seen relationships destroyed by digital jealousy, and they've decided the cost is too high. This represents a kind of digital masculinity that hasn't been fully recognized yet. Not the toxic masculinity of aggressive online behavior, nor the performative vulnerability of constant emotional posts. It's something quieter, more grounded, a masculinity that doesn't need digital validation to know its worth. Sometimes men don't post because they're struggling with depression or isolation. Their silence isn't strength but withdrawal. Yet even in struggle, their choice can be protective. They understand that seeking support through social media often leads to shallow comfort rather than real help. The hundreds of thoughts and prayers comments don't equal one real conversation with someone who actually shows up. The psychology of comparison is crucial here. Social media turns life into competition, but masculine conditioning already pressures men to compete, to constantly prove worth through achievement. Social media amplifies this unbearably. The men who don't post have refused to enter the competition. They've recognized that comparing your full reality to others' curated highlights is a recipe for misery. These silent men often have the richest inner lives. Without pressure to externalize every thought, they develop deep wells of reflection and self-knowledge. They read without sharing quotes. They travel without documenting every moment. They love without performing it. They grow without needing witnesses. And in doing so, they maintain something increasingly rare, an authentic self that isn't shaped by algorithmic feedback. This silence also represents rebellion against surveillance capitalism. These men understand that every post is data, every share is product. Their silence is resistance, a refusal to be commodified. There's something deeply masculine about this refusal. It connects to traditional values of independence and self-determination. They won't dance for the algorithm. In the end, that might be the most profound statement they're making. In a world that equates visibility with existence, these men are asserting something radical, that the most important parts of life happen offline, undocumented, unwitnessed, except by those who matter. They're preserving something we're all in danger of losing: the ability to exist without audience, to experience without documenting, to be without performing. They remind us that masculinity, identity, and worth aren't found in the public square of social media, but in the quiet moments of real life. The men who don't post aren't missing from the conversation. They're having different conversations entirely, deeper ones, realer ones. They're building lives that don't need digital proof to be meaningful. And maybe in their silence lies a wisdom we need to hear. That being a man, being human, doesn't require an audience. That the most profound forms of strength are often invisible. That sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing at all. Because these men understand something essential. That life's most important moments rarely make good content. They happen in the spaces between the posts, in the silence between the noise, in the life that continues after the screen goes dark. That's the ultimate psychology of men who don't post. They're not absent, they're present, just somewhere else. Somewhere that doesn't need Wi-Fi to exist. Somewhere that doesn't measure worth in pixels, but in weight and truth. They remind us that not everything needs to be shared to be real. That sometimes, the truest expression of masculine strength is the quiet confidence to exist without proof, to live without performance, to be without being seen.